publisher was, as I said, a fairly respected medium to large size press of nonfiction books. Nonfiction was one of the biggest. They've since been bought up by an even larger one, so I think that's kind of karma. And I got back my rights, and my latest publisher, the one who took on Killer, is a long story. I'm a jinx, all my publishers go out of business. He took that on, and I said, really, as sort of a passive-aggressive joke, how would you like to do the experiment? I'll rewrite Talking Dirty in Yiddish, and it was then called Talk Dirty Yiddish. I'll rewrite it, I'll expand it, how about publishing? He said, I'd love to. Well, then I'm stuck in redo it, which I did. 30% longer, 30% funnier. So he, however, my latest publisher, has a small house. He doesn't work out of New York, he works out of Valdosta, Georgia, which, if you want to know where that is, I've been there and I'm still not sure where it is. South, really south. Georgia, very south. There is a university there, so it's a little bit cosmopolitan, but not much. Enough to have an indie bookstore, which he happens to own. And a nice library in the town next to it that asked me to speak, and that was kind of an interesting experience. These ladies wearing pastel polyester, I expected them to have little white gloves on, which they didn't. Their deep southern voices. I couldn't understand them, they couldn't understand me, but they loved my books. So that helped tell me they were crossovers. The best thing about my new publisher, who does not pay advances, most small presses do not, is that he does pay royalties, which means bookstores will carry them. He takes returns, they're in Ingram, everything else, and he respects his authors. So he doesn't play games. So I had asked him for the new books, the new editions. He sent me a dozen. I've run out of space in my car. And I've still got all the old editions left to sell still. And he sent me 2 dozen of each. So I said, got the books, terrific, thank you, I love the way they look. But I did only ask for 12. And he said, no problem, I'm only going to charge you for the 12 each. He said, when you're ready to reorder, let me know, and I'll charge you the rest then, and that way you don't have to pay a second set of shipping costs. So that's what I consider being a mensch, which a big house would not do. I'm all in favor of small houses, but they don't pay advances, which, depending on your situation, could be a problem. Now, I did mention there were 2 problems with my suggestions. The other one is time. Especially if you still need a job with a reliable paycheck so you can pay your bills. Promo is not a matter of spending a few minutes a day checking your Facebook notifications or jotting down a couple of lines on your blog. It can be almost a full-time job in itself, especially when a new book is about to be published or has just been published. It can be hard to find the time. Work for a salary, care for your family and house, and just as importantly, care for yourself. Promote your books and write. Now, I solved the problem by retiring. I still have trouble finding time to write. I mean, it would help, of course, if I got up before noon and didn't procrastinate, go to movies, garden, bird, do volunteer work, and read others' books, only in the name of research, of course. But that's a story for another day. So, the bottom line, get out there and promote the hell out of your books. Yes, it takes time away from writing, but you won't have any market for those books that you are writing unless you do the groundwork and the PR. But you have to try to do it without a constant barrage of BSP, blatant self-promotion. I have a tendency to hijack other friends, mostly writers, posts on Facebook by putting in comments about my books. I say, does anybody have a recommendation for a good beach book? Well, mine. But I often, if I do go on for any length of time, apologize or thank them. I don't apologize. I thank them for allowing me to hijack their page for my BSP. And you have to take every opportunity to push. So, for example, the other day, I found a cartoon. I love cartoons. They're my reward. The last thing I read in the Inquirer every day is my reward for getting through the rest of the paper. And there was one about Catwoman. And it showed the Batman spotlight, but instead of the Batman symbol in the light, it was a can opener and a can of cat food. And the caption was, turns out Catwoman had her own special signal. So I posted it on Facebook with a quote from my first novel, Hanukkah Guilt, about why the protagonist cat is named Cat. Because no feline of my acquaintance has ever answered to any name that didn't sound like an electric can opener. Now, blatant self-promotion. Except that you are unlikely to become rich and may actually lose money. There are always exceptions, but the reason that there are exceptions and the reason that these authors make headlines is because it's not the usual. If it were usual, it wouldn't be news. If you write to become rich and famous, stop. There are only two reasons to write. One, you love doing it and can't stop. And two, to entertain your readers. And there's only one way to reach those readers. Network, promote, and get out of your parents' basement. Thank you. I want to. Or your child's basement. Thank you. I want to open it to you. I mean, everybody here, I've seen a lot of nodding heads, so I know many of you have been through what I'm talking about. I mentioned on the messenger list that it's going to be I don't want to be condescending and make you seem as though you don't know anything, but at the same time, what do I say? So I never apologize. I hope that I haven't offended anybody by saying the obvious. But I do want to open it up to everyone and ask for your comments, questions, observations, what has and hasn't worked for you. I particularly like to hear what has not worked. I always find that is much more useful than what has. So I open it to all of you. And if you have nothing to say, we can go to the food. Who said that? Nobody's going to have anything to say.
Yeah, I want you to explain about being a pantser.
Okay. Anybody know what a pantser is? Oh, there's a lot of nods. Okay. Two kinds of writers. Plotters and pantsers. Plotters are the ones that do an outline. They know every detail of the book before they write. They put pictures on Facebook of their workspace, covered with Post-it notes that they move around as needed. Then there are ones like me who are pantsers. We have the faintest idea what's going on. Not 100% true, because I do know in my head pretty much what's going to happen. But when I sit down to write, my characters tell me what they want to do and where they are going. And they sometimes will get me into a writing corner. At which point I take a shower and it all comes clear to me. But that means that it sometimes can take a long time for me to get to actually doing it, because I have to be sure I at least have some idea. I mean, I generally know the beginning and I know where I want to go, but it's that in between. With my latest book, Yom Killer, I got to about page 200 and went, what now? And then a couple of days later, it suddenly hit me that there was an entire subplot that was going to tie everything together that I'd forgotten to write about because I don't outline. And I just forgotten. I went, wait a minute, you're going to do something about the McCarthy era. Well, that turned out to be critical to the entire book and its solution. So sometimes it's not a good idea to do that. The other problem with being a pantser is research. So I'll be writing and writing and writing, and then I'll go, I have no idea if this is accurate. Now for my new book called Kill Megillah, it's, she finds, my protagonist, Rabbi Aviva Cohen, finds bones, a human skeleton, in a huge trunk full of Jewish texts that are to be buried, because you don't throw away a Jewish book. It's got God's name and you bury it in a Jewish cemetery. And then I realized I have no idea about DNA testing. I have no idea about what they can be tested. I have no idea what the steps are that the police will take, except for what I've read and seen on TV or movies. I have spent most of the last 2 years researching and getting nowhere because I'm just getting more and more confused. And then I have to think back to, wait a minute, were these techniques in existence at the time when the book was taking place? So at this point, I have finally decided, forget it, I'm just going to write, and what happens, happens. I have to hope that it's plausible, if not factual. My best example of that is writer, I don't know, some of you may know him, Jeff Cohen. He lives up in Windsor area. I can't remember exactly where. It's at Central Jersey, that people say don't exist. Except for Jeff says it exists. He writes cozy mysteries, very humorous ones, several different series. And he had his protagonist one time driving from Central Jersey down to Atlantic City, looking out the window at Camden on the Garden State Expressway. Jeff, that guy's got really good eyesight. I said, he's 60 miles away. And his response, that's why they call it fiction. So I keep reminding myself of that every time. I'm not quite sure about whether or not something can work or not. So that's I could never be a plotter.
Oh, that's funny. But is your process and your research different from when you're doing your cozy mysteries to your nonfiction?
Yes, very different, because nonfiction has to be researched. And as most of you know, I assume that when you do a book, a novel, you have to have the manuscript ready. And you submit the manuscript to agent, publisher, whomever. Nonfiction, you have to give them an outline. Then you have to be a plotter. You have to give them an outline, you have to give them examples of the first several chapters, you have to give them the contents of what the rest of the chapters will be. That's what happened with Talking Dirty and Yiddish. Well, the first one. The second one, he pretty much said, just do it. I know it'll be fine. But I kept the basic outline, I just switched some things around, because I didn't have to follow the template that the previous publisher had for the whole series of Talk Dirty books. So yeah, nonfiction is very different. You have to have a template, you have to follow it, you have to outline, you have to submit that to an editorial board for approval. And if they say it's fine, then you go ahead and write it. By which point you have, because of the outline, you have most of it written. So, I mean, that actually, forget about 2 years, it took me like 6 months to do. I had, the outline was a couple months, and then I only had 6 months to finish fill in the blanks. But that's what it feels like to me sometimes. When plotting is filling in the blanks. I think, for me, it stifles my creativity. For others, it works great. It's what works for you. No recommendations, because it's so individual. But yes, fiction and nonfiction are very, very different right now. This is a cookbook, recipes by the book Oak Tree Authors Cook, which Oak Tree Press is no longer in existence. Unfortunately, the publisher had a series of strokes, and she died a couple of months ago, so that they closed down. But we still are putting. We got together, and one of the other writers who does know the ins and outs of publishing this stuff put it out as a self-published thing from all of us, and that one I edited. And there, I had to come up with an outline to make sure that each chapter was consistent, because these are recipes that appear or are mentioned in all of the books written by authors for Oak Tree. And it included, author picture, cover picture, excerpt from the book, where it appears, as well as the recipe, and I had to make sure that the recipes were all the same. So I didn't write out teaspoon or put TS in another recipe. I had to make sure it was consistent. So that was a major mistake on my part, because, it wasn't a major mistake. It was a miscalculation. I had suggested it. Finished reading a book, the recipes in it. I put on our email list, wouldn't it be a great idea to come up with a cookbook? And everybody said, terrific. And I said, and I'll edit it. And everybody said, terrific. I think, how long is it going to take? A couple of weeks? 5 months later, finally got the thing finished. And then it took us like another year because it was the bottom of the publisher's list because it wasn't going to make her any money. She had all the writers, the novelists to produce first. So finally, we got it out and it's there. So if anybody's interested, I do have all my books here for sale. Other questions? I'm sorry, Kristen's the only one who has to keeping things moving like a good moderator does. Yes.
You were talking about promotion,
Yeah.
and I am editing my first novel right now. And I tend to be pretty comfortable with public speaking, so the idea of being on a panel, I like it. But why would anybody listen to me when I don't know what I'm talking about?
Because they want to hear about your process. What are you going through right now? How did you make the decisions you made? How did you come up with your characters? How did you come up with their names? How did you come up with your plot? Do you take things out of the headlines or do you just make them up? What genre do you write in? Are you a pantser or a plotter? Those kinds of things are those kinds of things are universal, whether you're published or not. And what steps are you taking to get published? So yeah, there'll be lots of reasons that people want to hear from you. Yes.
How do you find the quality conferences that would allow you to ask those questions?
Okay. This is where we get back to the idea of small presses not paying advances. Mystery Writers of America requires an advance, requires that there be an initial run of I don't know how many thousands of books. Oh, my publishers don't do that. So I can't be a member. So I was an associate member for a couple of years, affiliate member, paying some huge fee, go to a couple of conferences and find out I can't be on the panels because I'm not a full member. I stopped going. I actually quit. I quit the organization. I didn't sign up again. After the executive director, when I questioned her about this, I said, I've never paid a penny for my books except for the ones that I purchased to resell, which everybody does. You know, for editing, for anything, I get royalties. The only thing I don't have is an advance. So first of all, you can send me your tax form. I wasn't going to do that. I mean, I'm not running for president, but I still would do it. And then she said, well, we are for professional writers only. At which point I said, okay, tell the IRS I don't have to pay taxes. And that was it. I didn't hear one more. And I don't go to their conferences for that reason. And I've let people I know who are on their executive board exactly why I don't go to these conferences. And they all agree with me. And they're on the board of directors. But she kind of rules it with an iron fist. So the way I find these is through word of mouth. There's a group called Dorothy L. for Dorothy L. Sayers, one of the golden age writers of mysteries, the Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries. And that group has all kinds of, it has reviews of books, it has suggestions, it has TV shows, movies, but it also talks about conferences. And I'd hear about a conference and people would say, oh, this is a great conference, or I know people who went to them, and that's how I decide. So I go to, I'll tell you, I'll go to 5 of them, which is too much. One is the Left Coast Crime that I mentioned. And I just started to go to that one because I knew a lot of people on the West Coast. I had not done any promo stuff on the West Coast. Everything was East Coast. And I said, you know, people say it's a great conference. So I went. It's fairly large, not as big as VoucherCon, which I've been to 2 of them and will not go. It's too big. And people are friendly, and I know people who are there. I knew them from other conferences. Just in general, I knew them. So that was really, it's large, but it's friendly. And people knew me, so they let me be on panels. Public Safety Writers Association, which was in Vegas, which has nothing to do with me. I mean, I wrote an article for their newsletter about, you know, what's a 60s radical doing with this bunch of retired and active law enforcement officers, FBI, CIA, Vietnam vets. I mean, it's just It's crazy.